regular quarterly meeting of the Lawrence County Retirement Board, today being, thank you, Eric. I jumped in. Was I okay?
Yeah,
I'm
you're
sorry,
good.
I wasn't
And
paying
it might cut off the little beginning, but that's fine.
Thank you very much. Call to order this regular quarterly meeting of the Lawrence County Retirement Board. Today is Tuesday, June 3 of 2025. A couple of housekeeping items. I want to note the meeting is being live streamed and also being recorded. It's up and running, Vanessa?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And also, if you have a cell phone, if you'd be kind enough to put it on silent or vibrate, we'd appreciate that courtesy. Note that the meeting was advertised at the beginning of the year in accordance with the Sunshine Law, and that the state county code stipulates that a 5-member board be established in each county to oversee the pension fund, and the board consists of the 3 elected commissioners, the elected county treasurer, and the elected county controller. And in this case, the county controller also serves as the secretary to this board. We always begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'd ask you to remain standing for a moment of silence. Mr. Prestipine, could you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a brief moment of silence. Thank you all very much. I ask your indulgence for just a second, please. Annabelle, on those Fitbits,
Yes.
if you're going to pursue it and you want more information, I'd be very happy to put you in touch with the staff nurse at the County Commissioners Association. Her name is Jean Henry, and I can get you her contact information. She knows a lot about the entire wellness program, if you'd like. And if you'd want to just touch base with me later on, I can get you her phone number and everything.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Happy to do it. And she's a very nice woman, by the way. Thank you. Thank you all for your courtesy. Let's establish a quorum. We'll take a roll call, please.
Treasurer Rapone,
Present.
Controller Prestipine,
Here.
Commissioner Sinata,
Here.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Here.
Commissioner Vogler.
Here. All 5 members are present and accounted for. We set aside time during the course of this meeting for public comment. We'll do this in just a moment. And then before we adjourn, we'll have another opportunity for public comment. You're welcome to speak twice at both times. So you're welcome to speak once, or if you're just here to listen, that's equally fine. We ask that your comments be related to the pension fund and retirement board matters. And if you can try to limit your time to about 5 minutes or so, we would appreciate that as well. Before I turn it over for public comment, I will see if my colleagues have any opening statements or concerns. Mr. Kennedy? No. Sir, Mr. Rapone? Mr. Prestipine? No. Mr. Sinata? Okay, thank you all. At this time, I'll open the floor for public comment. If you do have a comment, if you could please enter your name into the record, we'd appreciate that.
Is it all right if I speak from here?
Yes, sir.
My name is Michael Joanno. I'm an attorney in Hermitage, and I'm here for Melissa Colaluca.
Are you related to Alex?
Yes, I met you at the Theta Chi House at Westminster College many years ago.
Let's not talk about what transpired when we met. But how is your brother?
I'll be attending his youngest son's wedding on Saturday.
Your
So
brother's a physician.
correct, obstetrician gynecologist, now just gynecologist and teaches medical school.
Oh, my good. Please give him my best.
I was planning on
And we'll
mentioning
chat,
it to you before.
Thank you, sir.
But that's not the purpose of me being here today. Ms. Colaluca is a client of mine, and she presented me a copy of a letter that was sent by the Lawrence County Retirement Board on February 24th of 2025. She had a question regarding why individuals who retired in the calendar year 2024 were not entitled to the COLA that was applied that would go into effect for the calendar year 2025. When she asked me to look into it, I did pull whatever information I could, including regulations, laws, things of that nature. And I could not find where there was language in the statutes or the regulations or the rules that said that only retirees from the prior year would be entitled to the COLA for the subsequent year. So our question and our request is, can you give us some guidance on how that became the guiding principle when the COLA was introduced and not applied to retirees from the calendar year 2024?
Thank you, Counselor. I'll begin briefly, and then I'm going to refer the question also to our board secretary, and then, if necessary, our solicitor. And believe me, if my other three colleagues wish to speak as well. My understanding is that this matter was brought to the attention of our actuary, and that in his capacity as secretary of this board, Mr. Prestipine did receive the correspondence that I believe you have a copy of from the actuary that gave us the guidance.
Actually, I have a copy of the correspondence from the Lawrence County Retirement Board, but not from the
That's
actuary.
all.
Okay, so we did have that letter, I believe, from the actuary. Okay. If you don't mind, Dave, I'll refer to you since you've dealt with them, again, if you don't mind. And then if the counselor wishes to speak, and then beyond that, we'll see if my three colleagues wish to add more to that. So, Mr. Prestipine.
Yeah, we get a letter every year from our actuary, comes in usually around October, telling us the amount that would cost the county to provide the cost of living to the retirees. And it says in that letter, it only includes the retirees that retired, which in this case would have been December 31st of 2023 and before. And when talking to our actuary, when this was brought up, they said that that is the practice they use, that is the way they interpret it. They use it here in our county. They're also the actuary in several other counties across Pennsylvania. They use it in all those other counties. And to my knowledge, and I don't have an answer for every single county, my knowledge, that's the way the majority of counties in the state use that. That's the procedure they use when giving the cost of living. The other reason, the other thing that gets brought into it is when they give us that letter, there is an amount on there that they tell us that's what the county, it's going to cost the county to provide the cost of living. And it only includes the retirees from that cutoff. So our decision that we make when we decide whether we're going to do it or not is based on that number. So if there was other people to be included and we're not, then our decision may not have been the same, because we based our decision on that number. That number was based on the retirees prior to that date.
Well, and I guess my question, if I may have a follow-up, is looking at all the regulations, the statute, the rules, I couldn't see where that was the line to be drawn.
From what they told me, and I don't think this is written anywhere in any statute, but from what they told me, they use that theory because every year there is the CPI that comes out in August is the one we have to use to give our cost of living. That's a number we have to use. We can't give any more, we can't give any less, we have to give that number. And their theory is that the people retiring throughout 2024, because that number is based on a 12-year prior cost of living. That's the cost of living of the 12 years prior to August. Their theory is that people retired during 2024 did not realize that 12 months yet, as far as the cost of living increase.
But the cost of living increase doesn't go into effect until the following calendar year, correct? Started in January of 25 for the.
That's when we start paying it, correct?
Yeah.
But it's based on August of 2024, the number that they get.
I can understand that still. Is there any place where they give us the foundation for using that cutoff? Because in the statute, it doesn't make that distinction. That's my concern, and that's why I was asked to look into it. And I said, well, the best place to go would be to the retirement board. I'm hoping that we can get some information because we're all just trying to do the best for the Lawrence County retirees. I think that's obvious. So can I get a copy of that letter? And does that letter give any basis for why they use that cutoff?
I can show you. I can get you a copy later. I mean, The letter doesn't show the basis of the cutoff. It does mention it.
And I guess one last question, would it be appropriate for me to reach out to the actuary? Is that a problem with the county? To see if I can get further information? I don't want to step on any toes, but that's the question we're trying to get an answer to.
That's a fair question, but it's a question I'll ask the solicitor to ponder.
I would need to speak with the actuary to see if they would be comfortable in speaking with someone that isn't actually employed by Lawrence County.
So how about we do this? I'll send a formal written request to Jason and say this is what we're looking for, and then you can give me the response, and that would be very much appreciated.
Any problems there, Mr.
No problem at
Solicitor? How about my fellow board members? Any objection to the proposal that the counselor has made? Mr. Prestipine offered a copy of the letter to Attorney Joanna. Any objection to us sharing that letter? I would.
No, it's public.
Okay. We can, you're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting, and then when we conclude, Mr. Prestipine could get that. I hope your schedules allow that.
I allotted enough time to be here.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, sir?
That is why we were here, and I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much. Now, I didn't give my other board members any comments, Dan? Okay. Mr. Rapone? Mr. Sonata? I will note, just for the record, we're blessed in Lawrence County to have a controller who is also a certified public accountant. And that helps us immensely, having a controller with that type of a background. And he's too modest to say that, but I can say it on his behalf. But we will get you that letter at the conclusion of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anything else, though? And we'll have another chance for public comment, but anything at this time?
Nothing further at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Our folks from the media had to leave. We'll move along. The minutes of the May 8th meeting are in your packet, gentlemen. I'll give you time to look them over. And whenever you're ready, I could take a motion for us to adopt the minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, we'll ask Vanessa to call the roll.
Treasurer Repellin,
Yes.
Controller Prestipine,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinata,
Yes.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogler,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you, Vanessa. As we do at each meeting, we're very happy to have Sarah Wilson from Marquette Associates with us. She's our investment consultant and does a wonderful job keeping track of where we stand. So you always give us an update, but help me before you begin. We're talking through the end of April or May?
Through the end, it's first quarter,
Okay,
and then I do have an update where you are through the end of April.
very good. So I'll turn it over to you, and I thank you, Sarah. It's good to have you here.
Well, good morning, and I apologize about the photocopy book, but I'll send those. Let's go to your first page, and we're gonna talk about the US economy, and I did give you the chart of the week with the handout, and I think this is gonna put a little bit, let's look at that first. It's gonna put a little bit into perspective of what's going on. When we look at the first quarter of the market, the big word out there is tariffs. And this has been driving this market up and down for the last 5 months. And so when we look at the impact of tariffs on equity, I thought this was just an interesting article we put out. If you look at that gold line there, you can see tariff exposed. And look at that dip, so you follow it along, and these are equities that have an impact of tariffs. And this is what really kind of moved that down market. Remember, in April, you can see the April 1st through April 8th, that was, the market almost hit, like completely down, we were carrying 1,000 points down, 800 points down, and that was really where the market dipped. When you look at the tariff insulated, you can see that it's right back up to normal. So to understand performance is to understand that some of your managers are gonna have a large exposure to tariff stocks that are impacted, and some of them will not have as much, and that's been your international and your global managers. And we'll go look at that, and that really protected you within performance for this quarter. And at the end of it, tariff stocks were down 14% for the quarter, and tariff insulated were 0.8, so right back up. So they've all kind of had a lot of volatility, but you can see that they almost dipped down to negative 20%. And a good example I thought was interesting about companies that were kind of tariff insulated was Ulta Beauty, which I thought was interesting, Levi Strauss, Domino's Pizza, and McDonald's. So these companies have already kind of were able to know that possibly this was coming and look for other sources there. We know that Target, John Deere, Dell Technologies are going to be really affected by those tariffs if they're imposed. So that is something just to keep in mind.
May I ask you a question? Assuming you're concluded with this
I
portion.
think you can ask me, sure.
You talk in here about stocks that are, quote, more negatively impacted by tariffs, unquote. And then you refer to, or the document, not you, the document refers to tariff insulated companies and organizations. But what I don't see in here, and I know there have to be some, what about companies that are favorably impacted by tariffs? And from what I've read, there are domestic steel manufacturers who are welcoming these tariffs. So has that been charted? It looks like you've charted,
We kind of look at
2/3
that,
of-
right, and I think that's just because of where the charting, we don't actually know what's gonna happen. The one thing to keep in mind is, yes, steel companies are gonna be very happy. Let's say that we decide to start producing a car in the United States. We don't have the infrastructure to do it. Do you know what I mean? So they're gonna have to develop. Now, if we wanna start developing that infrastructure, they will continue to that, and something like the steel companies will benefit. It's coming back. I think what you'll do is once we see what tariffs are gonna be imposed and how that looks like, then we'll start to see those companies that may benefit from them. This is what, when we look at this chart, it was immediately, all those stocks are already exposed. Either they're gonna have an issue or they're not gonna have an issue, negative or positive performance. The middle of the road stocks, as you're talking about, the ones that will benefit from them, we'll start to see that performance in 12 to 18 months.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Normally I wait till the end to ask my questions, so thank you for allowing me to interrupt you. And since I've done that, it's only fair that I give my colleagues their opportunity. If they have any questions on this specific chart of the week, and I'll start with Mr. Sonata.
Yes, Sarah, I look at your chart here. So the gold line, you're saying those stocks are still down about 12-13%.
At the end of April, when we did this, as of 4/29, they are still down about 14%.
14%. So the non-tariff related is pretty much back to even.
It's back to even. And you'll see that in performance. Through the quarter, you were down a little bit. We'll talk about that. But April, you've kind of come back in the positive through year end, through April. It's just, I think one of the reasons why I kind of started off with this quarter is we have seen an unbelievable volatile market. And a large part of that market, when I kind of talk to, boards like yourself, as being on a pension fund, you can't panic because much of this has been media driven. Sunday you go and they think they've done a deal with China or England, next thing the market's up 1,000 points. Next day, something else comes in, the market goes down. It's a lot of volatility, and that's why you as the board have done very well by diversifying, because you're going to see some of the asset classes that you did very well in. So yes, by the end of May, I think tariff is really going to be out there until they really sort it out. So I don't think you're going to see a lot better performance from those companies in the gold for now, but I think we just have to step back and wait.
Oh, I appreciate the information. I look at the chart when I look at the numbers, and I agree with what you're saying. It's one day we're down 1,000, the next day we're up. But it's all based on numbers. It's all based on the media market and what they're saying. And you're in a global situation.
Right.
It's just not the United States. It's a
Right.
global market. I That's what makes it more interesting. It's like, you know, everything is media driven now, social media and everything else, where these things come out. So I appreciate that. That's why I'm looking at this, and when I saw it come back, even that was the non, even when you say is it tariff related or is it not tariff related, even non-tariff could become tariff just
Correct.
because of the, like you said, you can't build a car in the United States anymore with totally United States parts.
Right.
We tie to Mexico and China.
Right, with the current infrastructure that we have. Now, will we develop that infrastructure?
That's,
Well, I would hope that we'll develop some of that infrastructure, because that will bring industry back. You know, like, look at what just happened with US Steel. You know, for our region, that's an amazing event if that stays here, you know, to keep jobs and grow jobs.
well, that's pretty much my question. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Prestipine? No, sir. Mr. Rapala? Mr. Kennedy? Okay, thank you all.
So let's talk about what happened, and that's gonna be your first page on, page 10, which is your first one that gets out there. We look at what happened. So real GDP growth, for the quarter is actually declining at an annualized -0.3. And in market, first negative, because you have a copy.
No, I know.
It's like this, Chris.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
No, not trusting.
It says US
I'm
economy.
sorry, it's the plan of the packet. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You found it?
Yep.
Okay.
Net exports were a large growth, our growth contracting 4.8, but it was the first time that GDP was negative since 2022. And when we look at that, we know that that kind of looks where, and then we look at consumer spending has declined a little bit since fourth quarter, but the consumer is out still spending, which is probably a little bit of a concern. We'll talk about that. We look at consumer and CEO confidence, and it's very interesting. That's at the bottom there, and you look at what is happening with that. CPI actually for April reached 2.3, but we look at consumer confidence, and we're now starting to go back. Remember when you used to look at the financial word and you go to 2008, you know, and then, you know, there were always these parts that you didn't know where the market was really negative. We go to that first quarter of 2020. That is going to be our gauge going forward when we look at things. And look at consumer confidence is only below the CEO confidence, which is more important because we look, they know what earnings per share are coming out, what's happening is really down. Then it bumped back up when we saw kind of COVID kind of go, and then it bumped back down, CEO confidence. A large part of that was we saw interest rates rise and it became more expensive to borrow. But the consumer has just been spending. So when you look at that, we talked about this time last year, the consumer was $1.4 trillion in credit card debt. And I always go back to that because it's just growing. It's not getting any less. And we know what happened with interest rates, it's not gonna go down as fast. So we do have a consumer, and then we've seen that for the first quarter, there was a little bit of slower growth, but then non-farm payrolls came back in April with 177,000. So a lot of things are happening within the market that almost kind of contradict each other. We look at the bottom on page 11, and this is where, that's your next page. We talk about the Fed rate. So like last year, beginning of the year, we thought there would be 5 cuts. Remember, there were only 3 small cuts at the end starting September. The Fed came out, and at the beginning of this year, we thought we would see 3 or 4 cuts. March, they came out and they said they're not going to cut. We kind of thought, oh, maybe they're going to cut at the next meeting. They're not. Now we're looking at probably only 2 cuts this year, and they're not going to start till September. So that is going to have a bit of a drag on especially small and mid-cap companies. Large companies can afford, to borrow money. They don't really want to do it. But when you see small and mid-cap companies, they need to be able to borrow so they can keep growing. And you also look at the short-term interest rates. We have a very different dynamic. And I think some of you were at our Pittsburgh luncheon that had the real estate managers on there. We know that institutional real estate knows where these interest markets are, the interest rates are. They are not as effective. it's gonna be your consumer. But when you look at prices around, probably regionally, home prices have not really dipped. What is starting to happen is those consumers that can go out and buy their first home, you know, they're gonna do a 30-year mortgage and they're looking at these interest rates, they're starting to rent. That is a huge part of the institutional real estate. They can't build them fast enough. If you don't have to buy owner's insurance, something breaks, just call up the realty company. So when we look at interest rates as an effect on mortgages and the consumer buying, we haven't seen that really go in to that. What we are gonna start seeing is we're gonna see defaults on credit cards. We're also gonna see what happened was when interest rates were that low in 2020, and a lot of people did credit lines. Those are just going up, and they're waiting for them to kind of cut back down. So that $200 interest credit line payment is now costing you $745. So if you look at that difference. And we also know when they cut rates, it takes credit cards a little bit of time, but the average credit card rate is between 28 and 32%. So that is gonna have an effect down the road. When you look at the next page, page 12, one of the things that really helped was being invested in international, and interestingly enough, Germany just approved a 500 euro billion spending package, which we're going to see a lot of growth, and the U.S. economy is going to have a bit of an effect on there too, because when Germany's economy grows, Europe grows, that's really good for us when we're exporting to them. And then we look at that page and we look at the total number of total exports to the U.S. and the high impact it has. So we know Mexico and Canada are highly leveraged to U.S. trade relations. And you can look at that 84% for Mexico, 77% for Canada. One of the things that we should note about Canada is that Canada, we import about 22 to 30% of our lumber from Canada. So that will be an interesting thing. We're going to start seeing lumber possibly spike again. And then we know when lumber spikes, building spikes. And then 15% for China, 21% for Japan. So when we look at that, we also know what's happening. We know China's this big word on the tariffs. But remember, we do have 90-day pauses, and then we'll continue to pause. So while they work this out, we're just going to kind of sit back and wait. Page 13, U.S. equities were negative. Obviously, we saw a very, very volatile market. We also saw a dollar weakness. But what we did see was, now remember, this is March through March. So for the trailing 12 months, U.S. equities did 7.2. But you look at developed non-U.S. equities for the quarter, were up 6.9. Emerging markets were up 2.9. We look at high yield bonds, international bonds are up 2.5 for the quarter. Commodities 8.9. We know that gold has hit, the highest it's hit. And then global listed infrastructure for the trailing 13 months did the best. And remember, you've got exposure to global infrastructure there. And U.S. REITs, real estate, as we started to fund it again. It's starting to come up and kind of hit its bottom, and we're starting to fund that again. When you go to the next page, you can see consumer discretionary is down 13% for the quarter. Information technology is down 12.9. What we remember, this top seven, the magnificent seven, they're still kind of driving this market a large part. The market had a nice bounce when NVIDIA released their earnings. But we've now seen emerging a low-cost Chinese AI, and that will have a drag on that sector if they can do it. And remember, AI is going to be a very interesting thing. So while you see all these companies doing very well, if you owned them 3-4 years ago, you've made a lot of money. But AI eventually means Microsoft laid off 3% of their employees. Are they replacing some of that with AI? Down the road, AI is actually going to come in and replace the physical person doing that job. So we have to kind of think that while it's done very well, it is going to have some places will have a very positive impact. In other places, it won't. And the other place is employment. You know, companies will be much leaner with AI. They don't have to pay benefits, you know, so there's a large part of where that's gonna be an interesting thing where we see that coming in. And then we see shares derived from outside the US, so share of sales, so we see that at the bottom of page 14. And we can see that the Magnificent Seven, all the way then, is 49%. Remember, sometimes it would have been nice just to hold those or to have a really high exposure. We didn't. Our managers are exposed to that, but remember, we're kind of tilted towards value, which kind of protects you in this very volatile market. And you see that 49%. So eventually that will kind of clean out and it won't be as a driving factor there. And I think the most interesting, and we'll get to what you've done, is page 15. At the bottom of that, if you look at that, we know that we look at earnings per share. And we look at valuations tend to contract, leaving the median price decline for the S&P 500 at 24%. In April, we actually approached the median post-World War II price decline in early April. And that kind of measures a recession, so we kind of tipped right there, and then when we went back up there. So you can see that there's a lot of things going where you see, you know, the market's up 1,000, then you see it going down. Fundamentally, looking forward, we believe that, you know, diversification is going to do really, really well for you. You can't look at a manager for 1 year performance or how you've done it to look 3, 5, 6 inception. There is a lot to be said that's going on in the next 6 months, what we're going to see happen, i.e. tariffs. But we're also going to go look at the fundamentals of the economy. Remember, you know, when they start saying that government's going to cut spending, it's like, well, maybe they overspent. The problem is when government cuts spending, who was the number one spender that upheld the economy last year? It's the government. So yes, in some ways you may agree, okay, they're going to, you know, cut spending. But then when they cut spending, how's that going to impact the economy? So there's a lot of things where we, you know, we're just saying, I think we need to watch the Fed. I think that you could possibly, you're starting to see some things that are saying inflation's on the rise up, which is kind of almost, you know, hard to believe, but it would be on the rise up if some of these tariffs go in. Things are going to become very, very expensive. So that could possibly mean they'll start cutting. They could also possibly start raising if, you know, the consumer just keeps spending and spending and spending. So I think it's going to sit back. I think it would be very interesting to hear from the June's meeting notes what happens. That might drive a little bit more what we have in insight to the next 6 months. Any questions on the market? All right, let's go to what you did the portfolio overview, your first page, page 22. You had, unfortunately, you were down 0.20, but you, in the first quarter, but you beat your benchmark. And for the trailing 12 months, you returned 5.7, had a net investment gain of 5.9. Since inception, you have an annualized return of 7.4. You've met your actuarial assumption. That is what this pension fund is supposed to do. And you've had a net investment gain of 65.3 million. We'll go look at positive attribution, Artisan and Dodge and Cox, defensive equity manager, fixed income was positive. And then what we did do, we made changes, is we reduced Artisan Global. It was at 5% target, we reduced it to 2.5. Remember, they really struggled with performance versus their benchmark. But when we brought them in, we talked to them, they were also the number one performing manager within their style. It's just that that benchmark, they hold 44 securities versus a benchmark of 3,400. So we kind of have to keep that in mind. And I think going forward, when you look at managers' performance, you can't just judge it on a quarter. You're going to have to understand what the market is doing to judge a manager. And we added a new global manager, WCM, and they right now are a mutual fund, but they are doing a CIT for us, which will bring down your investment cost on that. And page 23, we look at that. So year to date, through April, you were positive, which with all that volatility, you went positive, and year to date, you have cash flows of 1.3 million that came out of the account, but you ended with a gain of 103,000. So, you know, with the cash flows, it's a net gain. So you actually year-to-date did very well. And we look at the summary of cash flows there, and you can see you were down on 0.20, but the benchmark was down 0.50. So we did have some little better performance. You know, when you go down, you kind of want to go down less in the market so you can get up faster there. But I think the trailing 5 years is really nice because you've had a lot of issues there. You've had 2020 in there, you've had down market in there for the year, and you've had this quarter. You've annualized 10.5, and you've returned $45 million. And I think a large part of that has been you as a board working and really doing a lot of that asset allocation changes. So we're gonna look at how your managers did, and this is the last couple of pages that we have. And just look at that. Your equity composite for the quarter returned 1.3 negative versus 2.1. And really what is really driving that is Eaton Vance Smith, your manager, and that's the first page all the way down is negative 4.6 versus 7.5. And since inception, they've annualized 11.3 versus 8%. So they've had nice outperformance. As we always talk about that, you know, the S&P 500 is very hard to find a value manager that is out going to perform the S&P 500 for what it costs. So we index you. You get that performance, but you're only paying 0.08 basis points for the index. If you turn the page, you can look at your global equity composite. Struggled a little bit there, but they did do, Dodge and Cox did 6.1 versus 4.8 for 3 months. Artisan, you can see, came back negative 4.4 versus negative 6.8. And then we look at WCM Global, they've done for the month 6.8 negative. I mean, in their territory, they're right there, you can't judge them. MFS Low Volatility struggled for the last 12 months. We're not concerned with them. It's just the way their style of investing, and you can see for the trailing 3 years, they annualized 8.5 versus 5.6. So when you look at managers, it's always important to look 3, 5, 7 years. DFA, Emerging Core Index, did 1.1 for the quarter, and then for the year, trailing year, it did 6%. If we turn the page to page 34, we look at real estate. Real estate, since inception, actually you outperformed the real estate market. They did very well for you. But since inception, your real estate composite has done 4%. Remember, we funded that with half fixed income. We know fixed income has had some double-digit down years, so that is really good. And it also pays a nice dividend there. And for 5 years, it annualized 2.5%. This, we believe, is probably going to bounce back. And you look at TA Realty Core Property Fund, which we started to fund, and for the year they did 3.4 versus 1.2. Infrastructure, it's just done so well for you. Trailing 12 months, 6.7 versus 5.5, and then since inception, 9.5 versus 6.7. Remember, it's an inflation hedge. It also pays a great dividend because we know that money is going out every month to pay those benefits. And that was also funded with half equity and half fixed income. When we look at fixed income, you did 2.7 versus 2.8 the ag. We put in CSM fixed income, that's your active manager. We made that change in June 2022. They did 2.8 versus 2.8, right on their benchmark. In a year, they did 5% versus 4.9. And then Barrett Ford, we put them in September of 2024, and their Core Plus Bond Fund, I think you'll see that they'll do very well for you, and they've done 2.6%. Keep in mind that all these returns are net of all expenses. So when you look at them, they're net, and that's important to remember that when you actually look at there. So your managers have done well. They protected you in a down market. You know, we are looking at DFA just as a global manager. We put them in last year we're gonna kind of give them a year and a half to do that. And the most important thing to remember about Artisan and WCM, why we did that and split them, is they work really well together. They have a totally different way of weighing sectors, and I'll get that for you. We'll go through that the next board, just the stuff there. Are there any questions?
Let's start with Mr. Kennedy.
No, just thank you, Sarah. You're very well versed in all of this. You put us right where we need to be.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. Rapone.
Just thank you very much. I think throughout the uncertainty with the market, I think your report was still doing well.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Prestipine.
I have nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanada.
So I think, like I said, with the volatility and everything, it's done well. I remember you talked about foreign investment. How was that going? It's like,
Oh, you can see, if you go to that one page on 33, you can go look at your non-US global equities for the quarter, so that's page 33. And look at your non-US equity composite was positive 4.9 for the quarter.
I remember you mentioned,
Yes.
you had confidence in that.
That really, so doing that, now remember, global managers can go anywhere. They can go anywhere, and they can also go 60% US, 0% US. They have that kind of flexibility to go around and react a lot more, and that's why we want global managers in there. The international is nice, sometimes international doesn't do as well. But when you see a lot of volatility in the US equity markets, you don't usually see it in international. They've got some really good things going on in Europe right now. They've recovered from COVID. They've also putting in, Bank of England had also cut rates. So you're starting to see a little bit stronger economies there. So that's why it's nice to have some kind of diversification.
I remember you brought that up. Did you talk about that in Pittsburgh? I can't remember. I remember.
No, but you know what, Matt might have, our president.
Yeah, I just thought, and talking about, that was very helpful. I
Yeah.
thought, Bush Kennedy and David, gentleman was there, and we thought it went very well. I mean, we actually come away with a lot that day that we felt very confident when we came back, just because they explained it. That was when it was a very difficult time, if I recall, too.
It was, we were just hitting that horrible couple
Right.
of days and thousand down. It's interesting, and one thing that you have, that's our president, but he was also the director of research for years. And that's one thing, the amount of employees, the highest percentage of employees are in research. Because if you have research, you're not gonna get it back, hopefully. By the time they get into this portfolio, the due diligence is unbelievable. And then remember, they're getting watched weekly, every manager that we have in this, on the OCIO platform. So that is the one thing, but yeah, he's very well spoken, and I'm glad all of the who could be there were there. It was a really nice event, so thank you.
That's all I have. I do appreciate your information.
Thank you, Chris. I have one question. Is your organization monitoring the legislation right now in Harrisburg that would amend or alter the means by which we determine whether or not to implement a cost of living adjustment? Because the formula we have to follow right now makes it very challenging for us to do so. It looks like this legislation would give us a little more flexibility, and I'll let you answer, and I'm sure your respective organizations, the controllers and the treasurers, are watching this as well. But do you have anything to offer?
I think for a county that's in good shape, that's great, because it will make it a little bit easier. There are so many counties out there struggling, and you're one of the 3 or 4 that do give a COLA across. Remember, we go through that database report every year, and you're very fortunate to do that. There are probably 89 to 90% of counties that can't afford to do that, and to make it easier for counties to do that, that's going to have a weigh on their actuarial assumptions, and it's also. COLAs are very important because, you look at the cost of living, and then, you look at the retirees, and it's not a lot, and they're living off their pension funds. we have to keep in mind what it does to the budget, because, you know, even if it costs the county $100,000 a year, that adds up and adds up and adds up. So yes, we are watching that legislation. I think for, where you're sitting, being easier, it's not gonna really affect you. Being easier for some counties might just start throwing them out there, and that could be interesting to watch what happens with that. So, yes, we're watching that.
Thank you for that. Any comments from the board on that issue? I know the State Commissioners Association is keeping tabs on it as well. Again, I'm sure you folks are, and both the treasurers and controllers. Thank you, Sarah. Do you have any closing comments for us?
No, I'm assuming the actuarial is going well, getting
Yeah,
that
we got a
report done.
report.
That's right.
Last week we reported.
That's right, you sent it out to us.
Yeah.
Which one?
I get a copy of it too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think, when we look at that, that was probably a good way of how you did it.
Well, thank you, Sarah. We always appreciate your keeping us informed, and I know we meet every 3 months. I couldn't find in my calendar, I assume we meet in September sometime, but I don't have it written
Usually
down.
in August, but
Oh,
CCAP,
maybe it is.
We're the CCAP meeting.
Yeah,
yeah, CCAP kind of threw it in because they're meeting at a much,
it's later.
It's late.
Oh, I have it here. It's the 12th of August.
yeah, that's what I thought we had it.
Yes, because CCAP is the 18th, 19th, 20th. So I apologize. I have written down
I have
August
you on the
12th.
twelfth,
That
and
sounds right. Okay.
I don't remember the books.
That's fine, that's fine. So as of right now, August 12th will be our next regular quarterly meeting. But Sarah, thank you again so much. I'm going to now open the floor back up for public comment at this time.
Appreciate that. I do have one additional question that I pondered while we were listening to that excellent presentation. There was and I'm going to address this to Mr. Prestipine. You mentioned that the actuary uses the prior year retirees because of the CPI index going from August to August, and that would only include 8 months. Did I understand that correctly?
That was the way they explained it to me. That 12-month prior to, that the people retiring in 2024 didn't realize that 12-month period of August to August.
So my question is, and I don't know the answer to this, that's why I'm positing it. If I had retired on December 31st of 2023, would I have been entitled to the COLA that was granted in the calendar year 2024 that went into effect 2025?
Yes.
So that person had one extra day in that 8-month CPI, and they're included. Is that my
Well,
understanding?
I'm sorry, you said December 31st, 2023?
Yes.
Yes, anybody that point in prior would be included.
Okay. That was my only other question.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions or comments at this time? Thank you. Attorney Medor, anything on your end, sir?
No.
Thank you. Closing comments from my fellow board members, and we'll start with Mr. Sanada. Thank you, Mr. Prestipine. Mr. Rapone. Thank you. Mr. Kennedy. Thank you. We appreciate everybody being here today. I believe Mr. Prestipine will secure a copy of that letter for you, sir.
Much appreciated.
You're very welcome. Sarah, thanks again for everything.
And I'll see everybody with summer and all the fun.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Looking forward to it. There being no other business to be brought before the board, may I have an adjournment motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. This meeting is adjourned, but we'll have to have, did Joe leave? Joe left, didn't he? Can someone turn off the computer? I'm not good at it. Thank you, everybody, but we're still being broadcast.
Take care, miss.
It was nice seeing you.
Nice to see you. I talked to Mark, I'll tell him I saw you.